Tahiti by Alice Dunbar Nelson. Episode 1 The Boy Who Knew the Streets. It was cold that day. The great sharp north wind swept out Elysian Field Street in blasts that made men shiver and bent everything in their track. The skies hung lowering and gloomy. The usually quiet street was more than deserted. It was dismal. Tidy leaned against one of the brown freight cars for protection against the shrill norther and warmed his little chapped hands at a blaze of chips and dry grass. "Maybe it'll snow," he muttered, casting a glance at the sky that would have done credit to a practiced seaman. "Then won't I have fun? Ugh, but the wind blows." It was Saturday, or Tidy would have been in school, the big yellow school on Marini Street, where he went every day when its bell boomed 9 o'clock, went with a run and a joyous whoop, ostensibly to imbibe knowledge, really to make his teacher's life a burden. Idle, lazy, dirty, troublesome boy, she called him to herself, as day by day wore on, and Tai Ti improved not, but let his whole class pass him on its way to a higher grade. A practical joke he relished infinitely more than a practical problem, and a good game at pin sticking was far more entertaining than a language lesson. Moreover, he was always hungry and would eat in school before the 10:30 recess, thereby losing much good playtime for his voracious appetite. But there was nothing in natural history that Tidy did not know. He could dissect a butterfly or a mosquito hawk and describe their parts as accurately as a spectacled student with a scalpel and microscope could talk about a cadaver. The entire 3rd District, with its swamps and canals and commons and railroad sections, and its wondrous, crooked, tortuous streets, was an open book to Tidy. There was not a nook or corner that he did not know or could not tell of. There was not a bit of gossip among the gamins, little Creole and Spanish fellows, with dark skins and lovely eyes like spaniels, that Tahiti could not tell of. He knew just exactly when it was time for crawfish to be plentiful down in the Claiborne and Marigny canals, just when a poor, breadless fellow might get a job in the big boneyard and fertilizing factory out on the railroad track. And as for the levee, with its ships and schooners and sailors, how he could revel in them. The wondrous ships, the pretty little schooners, where the foreign-looking sailors lay on long moonlight nights, singing to their guitars and telling great stories. All these things and more could Tahiti tell of. He had been down to the Gulf and out on its treacherous waters through the Eads jetties on a fishing smack with some jolly brown sailors, and could interest the whole schoolroom in the talk lessons, if he chose. Tahiti shivered as the wind swept round the freight cars. There isn't much warmth in a bit of a jersey coat. "Wish it was summer," he muttered, casting another sailor's glance at the sky. "Don't believe I like snow. It's too wet and cold." And with a last parting caress at the little fire he had builded for a minute's warmth, he plunged his hands in his pockets, shut his teeth, and started manfully on his mission out the railroad track toward the swamps. It was late when Tai-Ti came home, to such a home as it was, and he had but illy performed his errand. So his mother beat him and sent him to bed supperless. A sharp strap stings in cold weather, and a long walk in the teeth of a biting wind creates a keen appetite. But if Tidy cried himself to sleep that night, he was up bright and early next morning, had been to Mass, devoutly kneeling on the cold floor, blowing his fingers to keep them warm, and was home almost before the rest of the family were awake. There was evidently some great matter of business on the young man's mind, for he scarcely ate his breakfast and left the table soon, eagerly cramming the remainder of his meal in his pockets. "Ma foi, but what now?" mused his mother, as she watched his little form sturdily trudging the track in the face of the wind. His head, with the rimless cap thrust close on the shock of black hair, bent low, his hands thrust deep in the bulging pockets. "A new live play toy it may be," ventured the father. "He is one funny child." The next day Tai-Ti was late for school. It was something unusual, for he was always the first on hand to fix some plan of mechanism to make the teacher miserable. She looked reprovingly at him this morning, when he came in during arithmetic class, his hair all wind-blown, his cheeks rosy from a hard fight with the sharp blast. but he made up for his tardiness by his extreme goodness all day. Just think, Tighty did not even eat once before noon. Something unparalleled in the entire previous history of his school life. When the lunch hour came and all the yard was a scene of feast and fun, one of the boys found him standing by a post, disconsolately watching a ham sandwich as it rapidly disappeared down the throat of a sturdy, square-headed little fellow. "Hello, Edgar," he said. "What you got for lunch?" "Nothing," was the mournful reply. Why don't you stop eating in school for a change? You don't ever have nothing to eat." "I didn't eat today," said Tighty, blazing up. "You did." "I tell you I didn't," and Tighty's hard little fist planted a punctuation mark on his comrade's eye. Continue watching the story in episode 2, The Secret at the End of the Track. But what drove Tighty to forfeit even his precious lunch that day? And what secret was he already keeping from them all?